SABC News, Finance Minister Malusi Gigaba produced a budget speech which he said was tough but hopeful. He joins me for more on that budget speech. Thanks so much for your time, Minister.
You're welcome.
Let's talk about VAT. It's the biggest talking point from that budget speech. You've increased social grants and said that poor people won't be as badly affected. But the input costs that go into something like brown bread will be affected, which means that prices will increase. How are you going to balance this?
You must also remember that there are 19 items on the basket of zero-rated foodstuffs, and there are discussions that are taking place around whether we should add more. The ANC's National Executive Committee, as well as COSATU and some other stakeholders have said we need to consider adding more zero-rated foodstuffs. So there are discussions towards that effect. But I think it's important to say that the budget contains a whole range of things and is an attempt to balance between different needs in the country and priorities so that we are able to present a credible fiscal framework. We are also able to implement our programs. So there was more to the budget than the VAT, and we have tried through that to also cater for the poor and ensure that in the course of all of this, we can address the interests of young people by providing fee-free higher education funding for the next 3 years and ensure in the course of all of it that we can provide a stimulus to the economy, because ultimately what matters for us is not only fiscal consolidation or the VAT increase, but it's growing the economy so that we can create jobs, we can get the economy growing and get more people into employment.
With that 57 billion rand allocated to fee-free higher education, almost seemed like a stopgap measure because former President Jacob Zuma announced it quite late into the year and a little bit before your budget. So it seemed almost an emergency measure. How are you going to, in the coming years, make provision for those students who are going to increase and allocate more money towards that fee-free higher education?
We had been in discussions with President Zuma in the form of the Interministerial Committee around fee-free higher education, discussing how we're going to implement it, how we would phase it in, and how we would provide funding for it in the budget. And so it's not a stopgap measure, but you need to start implementing the program so that we can provide for the future of the country by empowering the country's young people. It's a massive investment that South Africa has chosen to make. Going forward, we will look at the revenues, that the revenue enhancement measures, the tax increases that we are implementing and growing the economy, the revenue that we will collect from taxpayers in the form of all the tax measures that are available in the country so that we can provide funding for fee-free higher education and other programs of government. As we announced in the budget, our expenditure ceiling increases to 1.9 trillion rand as a result, among others, of the cost of fee-free higher education, and higher education becomes the largest expenditure item in terms of our budget at the present moment. But over the coming years, it's going to stabilize as we now factor it into the budget process and roll it out to larger sections of young people.
Mm-hmm. The issue of fee-free higher education is balanced by what you've also talked about, radical socioeconomic transformation. So to what extent can economic policy deal with very structural issues? Why we need 57 billion rand to send mostly poor black children to university?
You know, it's a very interesting thing that we have done, because ultimately, if you look at it, the fee-free higher education means that we've given poor people 12.4 billion rand social income during the course of this year, rising up to 57 billion, becoming 57 billion rand over the medium term. This should be regarded as social income for the poor, of course, an investment to young people. So as we implement the program of fee-free higher education, it's part of the radical socioeconomic transformation plan that the ANC has, that government has, which includes a number of other initiatives which I announced, which would deal with altering the structure of production in the economy, altering the spatial patterns in the economy by providing support through the City Support Program for the development of black townships in the metros and the bigger towns, and which would involve structuring the ownership and worker profile of our country through a number of programs. I did announce, among others, that we are going to take further drastic measures to ensure that the 30-day payment rule is complied with in government, which will support a lot of small businesses. Many of them are women-owned and youth-owned and black people-owned, and that we are going to review the evergreen contracts, some of which or most of which belong to your established companies, because once we review those evergreen contracts, we will reduce the barriers to entry and allow new entrants into the economy to come in, which will create jobs and expand the ownership of the economy. But in addition to that, the Competition Commission is working very hard to deconcentrate the South African economy, to reduce barriers to entry and get the South African economy to be more broadly inclusive than it is at the present moment.
Okay, with this budget, we've also seen the biggest contraction in public spending in order to make way for some of these measures that you've spoken about. We were reviewing your budget with an economist, Trudy Makaya, who was saying she's worried about the lack of clarity on where these spending cuts are going to come from. Are they going to influence other programs that are equally important and that may not be getting a spotlight?
We have been very careful in deciding where to cut. We have looked at a 2% across the board cut in administration. There was a proposal from Cabinet of a 5% across the board cut. We reduced it to 2% because we knew it was going to have a significant effect on the functioning of government and eventually on stimulating growth and demand in the economy. We've cut from transfers to provinces, transfers to municipalities, transfers to public entities. We've looked at programs that are either not performing or that can be delayed to a later date, so that even as we cut, we don't cut right into the bone in a way that's going to impact negatively on the economy. So we've been very careful and measured. We know that this is not an ideal situation, but we've been going through 3 years of fiscal consolidation already. And the economy last year experienced a 51 billion rand shortfall, which fortunately improved by 2.6 billion rand during the course of the year to end up at about 48 billion rand. That improvement, slight as it was significant, but it was still a modest improvement. We still needed to inject a lot of money. I think the question that we need to ask ourselves is, what would have been the outcome of not cutting spending and enhancing revenues? We saw it in October last year, after we presented the medium-term budget policy statement, that the ratings agencies immediately moved to cut our investment grade, and we are left with Moody's now, which has kept us at investment grade. If we don't take drastic measures to avoid another ratings downgrade, the impact on the poor will be even more severe than the measured steps that we have taken in order to stabilize our debt, whilst we also implement programs that are going to boost confidence in the economy and stimulate growth.
Okay, bearing in mind Moody's was a consideration when you were doing the budget. That's quite a short-term look at what we need to do with our budget. Also considering that if our public spending is cut, we're seeing that private sector spending is also reduced because of, some people have said, issues with policy uncertainty, economic uncertainty and political uncertainty. How then do you make sure that we don't see both reduced spending in the public sector and private sector leading to a depressed economy?
You know, considering a ratings downgrade may seem as a short-term intervention, but in the long term, should a ratings downgrade materialize, it's going to have a long-term effect on the economy and on poor people above everybody else. So we needed to take these steps. The South African private sector is sitting on a lot of money which they could invest if we boosted business confidence and provided political and policy uncertainty. Since December last year, we have seen a shift in political certainty, which has boosted confidence. We saw the exchange rate strengthening, the rand. We also saw the bond yields being lower. And we are seeing positive growth in confidence, which, according to the South African Chamber of Commerce and Industries, is the highest since 2009 at the present moment. We need to take further steps to ensure that we boost business confidence even more so that we can get investments going. If you look at structural reforms in the economy that will provide policy certainty, the President announced very strong measures around mining policy, around telecommunications, around the procurement policy reform, around fighting corruption and other measures that we think will go a long way towards providing policy certainty. I did indicate also in the budget that we will have our financial sector summit this year. All the financial sector reforms are well on course to be implemented so that we can, at every aspect of the economy, in all the sectors of the economy, provide policy certainty which will induce investments.
After your budget speech, Treasury issued a statement where they're saying that you've spoken to all the ratings agencies who seem quite satisfied with your speech. Also, the business community coming out and being impressed with your budget speech, saying it took the right stance. Do you think that Moody's will not downgrade us further when they do issue a ratings for South Africa?
We remain forever hopeful. We are going to be all right. I think that they will consider all the steps that we have taken, because the issues they have raised with us in the past have related to political certainty, the governance of state-owned companies, their management and financial sustainability. They've raised concerns about issues of corruption and perceptions of corruption in the country, and they've raised concerns about policy certainty. We've already begun addressing all of these things, and the budget was a culmination of all this work, but a major contribution to also the work that we are doing. And I think that Moody's will consider all of these steps that we have taken, and the fact that we've taken very drastic measures to stabilize our debt and ensure that we implement fee-free higher education, not only by just breaching the expenditure ceiling, but by finding new revenue sources that are going to enable us to implement this program as we had promised in the MTBPS. So we think that we will be able to get a stay of execution, because we do need to stabilize our ratings outlook so that we can begin having a bit of leg room to do the things that we need to do. I think that even the 1.5% growth projection that we made in the budget is quite modest, given that if we implemented all the structural reforms, sorted out our state-owned companies, stabilized the debt or began to reduce the debt of the state-owned companies, brought in the private sector into some of the SOEs and infrastructure rollout, we can get the South African economy growing more robustly than it is projected.
So we saw you quoting Kendrick Lamar in your budget speech, which young people seem to love. We also saw that you use social media, which you are quite active on, to get inputs on your budget speech. Also saw someone this morning or yesterday claiming that he's a motivational speaker and he helped write parts of the budget. How exactly is the budget written, and who contributes to it besides the people at Treasury?
The budget is written only and by only people who work at the National Treasury. There is no one else who contributes to the budget, because we can't risk making the budget known to someone who is outside the National Treasury prior to its presentation. We engage with people, we engage on social media, we listen to views, both serious and jokes. Betusile saying that we need to reduce the price of oros and eggs, and King Case is saying we need to put aside some funding for Candy Crush rehab. I see a number of other people say they have a similar challenge. But we do engage with people. In our engagement, we take their views. Of course, we will acknowledge them when we present the budget speech. But in preparing the budget, it's done by the people at Treasury. It's an involved and very extensive process. It takes days for us sitting as the top management, both the executive, the minister and deputy minister and the top management of the department going through the budget. We have a team at the back office at Treasury that check the figures to ensure that all the facts and details we provide are accurate. And by the time we present the budget, the budget speech, it's a culmination of an extensive process that would have started months with consultations with cabinet, the budget council with finance MECs, the budget forum, which includes SALCA and local government mayors, and the process which involves our own teams at National Treasury, very professional people. I really take my hat off to the Treasury staff for the work that they do to ensure that by the time we present the budget review has been completed. We then draw the budget speech from the budget review so that we can present the type of information. And I think that the presidency plays a big role because the State of the Nation address does give us the political context for the work that we have to produce now when we do the budget speech. And of course, some bit of inspiration from the cultural community.
Okay. Minister Gigaba, you're speaking about the presidency. We've heard rumors of a cabinet reshuffle. Have you heard anything on that, and do you think you'll be our finance minister next week?
Well, I wouldn't be here if there was such. But even if there is a reshuffle, I think we've been saying this thing over and over again. Whenever it happens, the president must be allowed the space and time to set up his team, to decide who will be part of that team and how will the team in totality be composed. We all serve at the pleasure of the president, and when the president decides to redeploy you, you go back to your post as a member of parliament, because we are members of parliament, at least most of us. And those who are not members of parliament, they will be deployed in other areas. And I think that instead of putting the president under pressure to remove this one, remove that one, and do it at this time, let's allow the president. I think he made that appeal in parliament. And when he makes the decision, and whatever decision he makes, we need to support him fully. I believe in the vision of President Ramaphosa, and I think that already you are seeing a positive progress under his leadership. We will need to continue supporting him to ensure that it delivers to our expectations. But I think South Africans should not be unfair on the president and place on him unrealistic expectations, because he is also human. He needs to clear his thought and not be made to work under pressure.
Thank you very much for your time. Finance Minister Malusi Gigaba speaking to us in studio there. It's time for a look at your market news after the break. Do stay with us.